How's it going though? You're right.
Alhamdulillah, I'm good. How are you?
Yeah, not bad, man.
It's been a long time. It's what, 1:30 to 1:15 a.m.
Say that again.
So it's 1:15 a.m. or
12:15.
12:15. Alhamdulillah, still late, nevertheless.
No doubt, no doubt. The time I usually sleep.
What time? What? You say again?
It's the time I'd usually go to bed now.
Oh, alhamdulillah. Remember when you were here, you did not sleep whatsoever.
That was the problem. I remember I had to get sleeping tablets and stuff.
Allah understand. The jet lag and stuff. Allah reward you for this time, inshallah. So obviously I didn't formally introduce you, but you're mashallah the heavyweight, the man himself, the one and only. So coming at 355 pounds, yeah, I don't think I need to introduce you. But basically, the crux of this topic, I'll let you. I'll just introduce the topic, and then I'll let you talk for a while, and then we'll go back to questions, inshallah. Basically, the idea of this was titled "Being Us in the U.S." Basically, a lot of the time, especially when it comes to moral stances, we tend to be apologetic or on the defensive end. So that's one angle, as in being what is there to be proud of being a Muslim. So that's one point. The second point is the backlash, or at least the pressure that we have from other communities on ours, to try to adopt certain ideologies or philosophical ideas. So what is there to be proud of as a Muslim for, I guess, my moral stances? I guess that's one of the main arguments. Put up this one. Give me 1 second. So basically, we need to address a couple of things. One of them is why we should stand our ground, or as in why we should be proud of who we are, and why we shouldn't compromise. The second thing that we want to discuss as well is, okay, and now I know that Islam perhaps is the truth, or I know that it is the best way of life, but how do I deal with people that do not accept my my stances? I mean, it's perhaps going off your previous talk, the one you had for the main session, which was exquisite, by the way. Basically, how do you deal with people of different moral barometers or moral ontologies, like, for example, the LGBTQ community? How do you deal with those people? So forget the philosophical side of things. How do you deal with them? A certain way, are you going to shun them, or what do you do exactly? So I'll leave that to you.
I think that the best way, first of all, but the question of what have we got to be proud of? And there's a lot to be proud of. There's a lot to be proud of in the sense that, I mean, the very fact that we don't believe that this world is going to last forever and that we're going to die and that there is an afterlife should give us a confidence that no one else has, you know. And the very fact that we worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His oneness. I mean, we believe God is with us, and not in the obviously the physical sense, but we're talking about we believe that God is on our side. There's so much for us to be proud of, and we believe in the Creator God, the true God. And so, what really is beautiful that I really like is the hadith of the Prophet Muhammad when he says, "Ajaban li amri al-mu'min, inna amrahu kullahu lahu khayrun, wa laysa dhaka li ahadin illa lil-mu'min. إن أصابته سراء شكر وإن أصابته ضراء صبر وشكر." That wondrous is the affair of the believer, and that all of his affair is good. If good things happen to him, he is thankful, and if bad things happen to him, sabara wa shakar, he is patient and he's also thankful. So we can't go wrong. We can't go wrong in terms of the confidence that we should have. Because at the end of the day, everything is good for us. Everything is a test. Either we're learning التعلم من التألم, learning from the pains of life, or we are enjoying the pleasures of it. No one has that except وَلَيْسَ ذَاكَ لِأَحَدٍ إِلَّا لِلْمُؤْمِنِ. No one has that except for the believer. So there's so much to be proud of there. And the hadith is another hadith which is beautiful. It's about the believer being firm like a special kind of tree, and the disbeliever is like a tree which, when the wind blows, it just knocks it over, finishes it off. But the true believer has his roots entrenched into the ground, and even the heaviest of gusts and wind will not push them over like that. And so when you have those things to your name as a Muslim and to your privilege, then I think, wallahi, there's only the dignity that comes with that is unmatched and cannot be compared to anything else. What was the second question you had, bro?
Give me a second, I pull it up again. So I'll get back to the first point because I do have a couple of points, a couple of remarks to make. But
Yeah.
how do you deal with people that have different moral barometers or moral ontologies, like the LGBTQ community? We agree to disagree. We live in a society. I mean, especially in the West, you live in a society where every community is they can do whatever they want. I'm not sure if the harm principle applies here or not, but how do you deal with those people, like the LGBT community? Do we badmouth them all the time? Do we shun them, or how do you deal with such a community?
Definitely not that, because obviously the confrontation approach will not be helping the dawah in any way, shape, or form. I don't think that's a clever thing to do politically either. So there's those two reasons why you shouldn't do that. However, I think that with the LGBTQ community or anybody else, you have to first conscientiously make a decision. And are you going to be a sheep or are you going to be a shepherd? And if you know that you're the kind of character, timid and fickle type of individual that the yes man, and anything that anyone says, you're going to agree with it, then you shouldn't be in the company of people that are likely to sway you in their direction. But if you have thiqatun nafs, if you have self-confidence that in whatever relationship you are in, whether it's with colleagues or friends or school, whatever, that you, especially when you have the haqq, the truth, when it comes to promoting that truth, you are going to be the shepherd. You are going to be the one who directs the flow of the conversation. Then by all means do the dawah. But if you know, and you have to really do a self-assessment here, you have to be honest with yourself, that you're too embarrassed to talk about religion to homosexuals, or that they'll be too dismissive of you, or that you won't be able to do it justice, then just leave them be, because they're likely to sway you in that direction. The worst thing to be in respect to those communities is a sheep or silent. If you're silent and just trying to mind your own business, but you're seeing these people and acquiescing to their worldviews and not challenging them at all, that's almost as bad, because you might know these people for a long time, but you've never spoken to them about religion and stuff like that. So I would say you can't be a sheep in those circumstances. You have to be a shepherd. And if you can't be a shepherd, then go home and save yourself from being a sheep to other people's agendas.
Okay, fair enough. How about this? I mean, you're talking as if we're distinct communities. I mean, I'm gonna play devil's advocate for a minute, but you're saying as if we're distinct communities. But for example, if you go to a public high school, these people are, people I've grown up with. So there's become so close, such that sometimes the barriers fall. As in, I have to work with them day to day. So maybe on a more social level, I mean, maybe let's leave the intellectual side things aside, intellectual stuff aside. But on a more social end of things, how do I deal with those people? So I have to work on an assignment. Do I tell the teacher I'm not working with this person just because they're,
No, no, you don't do any of that.
or
I
how do you
would
mitigate?
No, you don't do any of that. You don't do things that look. The reason why you go to school is so you can pick up your qualifications. The reason why you go to work is so you can get money to feed your family yourself. So it's a completely different paradigm there. I mean, if people want to, if you have a homosexual colleague that wants to engage with you, then you can engage with them. But I mean, you don't put things in danger. Don't put yourself in a position of just find opportunities like when you think is the right time, when they come to you and ask you questions in a manner which is clear and sadid, وَقُولُوا قَوْلًا سَدِيدًا, like straightforward speech, but at the same time, which is hakim, wise speech. It's not the confrontational approach, because that won't get you anywhere. That's the worst. That is the worst approach of all of them, to be honest. But it's just a respectful approach. And if it's a colleague, then like I said in the main speech, you can spread it out over a year or 2 or 3 even, because you're going to be with them for all that time.
Mhm. So I'll delve more into it. How or what would be the limits? As in, do I just interact with them normally, as if they're, for example, we're love is in the air, we're just buddies, or are there certain limitations because of the fact that they are a certain way, or what would be how would I deal with such people, or are there any, or is it just limited to the formal work that I have between us?
Yeah, just keep it professional. Keep it professional. As simple as that. You're going in, doing your thing, keeping it professional. Whatever it is you're working as. If your colleague who happens to be gay wants to speak to you about something which is work related, then that's absolutely fine. If I mean, I've been working with, I worked with homosexuals a long time, and they know what my stances are. But at the same time, we're not talking about this stuff. Like at work, the context is we're all just going to do what we need to do. If they want to speak about religion and so on, we can speak about religion. But if they don't, then I could bring it up subtly, through in conversations. But you don't want to drive them away, and you don't want to. The worst thing is if you say something, I'm not going to work with this guy. That's going to burn bridges, and in fact, you might even lose your job. I don't know what the code of conduct is in America and what the laws are, but things like that, people don't want to work with people like that, and you might be jeopardizing, your family income by doing silly stuff like that.
Okay, khair. So let's take a step back. I mean, perhaps we've spoken about the assumption here that we unequivocally denounce something like that. But let's take a step back. Why do we, again, to the whole point, why should we stand our ground? What is it about Islam or morality in general that separates it or sets it aside from other moral um, ideologies? As in, maybe I guess you can touch on the ontological basis of other philosophies, or if there is any to start with.
Yeah, I think you kind of answered your question. Like, Islam is about Tawheed, it's about oneness of God, it's about the Creator God, it's about Allah being Alim, أَلَا يَعْلَمُ مَنْ خَلَقَ وَهُوَ اللَّطِيفُ الْخَبِيرُ. Does he not know what he created, and he's the all subtle, all aware? The Quran says in chapter 67, Surah Al-Mulk, for example. So Allah knows what He created, and therefore, if we believe in the authorship of the Quran is from God, then it makes sense to follow it in all matters relating to gender dysphoria or lack thereof, sexuality and what types they are, how fluid it is, and how to conduct yourself, and all aspects of life. And at the end of the day, that's the premise on which everything else hangs.
Okay. So bouncing off that, Well,
Yeah,
why would something like a lot of people nowadays, they assume, I guess, the harm principle generally is, which is, you can do whatever you want so long as you don't harm anybody else, or live and let live, and that's it. So it's like it's a strict sort of liberal uh,
that's right.
stance. Why is a lot of time we take that as the objective, or um, as the accepted barometer or yardstick for morality.
Yeah,
Um, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. What was I going to say? So basically, why is it that, for example, when they come to speak about certain things regarding Islam, as the age of Aisha, for example, or whatever it is, they come and the thing is, the assumption is that, or their barometer is their liberalism. You know what I'm saying? They measure your Islam with their yardstick, but that doesn't always, I guess, follow. Can you touch upon that?
that's right. I think you're absolutely right. I think that's a good point. That's a really good point. At the end of the day, they have their own moralities, which come from white men for the most part, and they say they're not religious, but a lot of them are putting religion down our throat, but in the form of political philosophies like liberalism and feminism and so on. They want us to believe in that no matter what. And so I agree with you. I think that there is a lot of them using their own principles to try and kind of impose it on us, and we don't need to do that.
So I just want to make a remark. So please, you guys, under the video, if you're watching on the website, under the video, there's a chat section. Just write your name and join the chat. If you have any questions, please, or comments or concerns, you can
Yeah,
just
for
come on
sure.
the chat. Yeah. So we had a lot of chats for the previous session. Okay, 1 second. Let me look at my notes. Mm. 1 second. 1 second. Sorry, give me 1 second. Some problem. Okay. Okay. Sorry about that. We had some difficulties, but
No,
yeah. So
yeah,
I had a question saying, I'm not sure how related this is, to be honest, but it was more about integrity, or being honest with yourself. Maybe you can correlate it, but basically, I'm just going to read the question anyway. So it's saying that um, being ourselves, so, being us in the US, basically, to yourself that certain things you're not meant to do, like, for example, white lies, um, or social media, for example, or certain things you post on social media, just because you're used to people doing certain things. So you're just following suit. But I think the remark was basically, it's important to be honest with yourself and try to #represent, as in you don't need to compromise your values.
absolutely.
Yeah. Other comment says, why should we not compromise or give in? I guess that's a whole topic. Okay. So there's one thing I wanted to mention as well. Is, one thing
Yeah,
actually Doris has mentioned, and maybe you can expand on it. But he was saying that when you look at a lot of the atheists, or the quote unquote ex-Muslims, when they leave the faith, most of the time they do hide behind intellectual reasons, but really and truly, that's not really the main cause. It's actually because of communal reasons, because everybody has, or want to have a sense of belonging. But then when that is not there, when your parents are barely teaching you anything about religion, apparently not even Muslims, you have to ask them to know that they're Muslim. They don't have a community to support them, and it's already difficult, for example, to wear the hijab. So in school, there's a lot of pressure, implicit or explicit. There's usually a lot of pressure. So a lot of the time, the kids, they leave the faith, like there's no sense of community here. So and there's no support either. So let's just leave it all together. And then the thing to hide behind is intellectual reasons.
Yeah, I've noticed that as well, actually. It's true.
Yeah, it's really interesting
Like
because
one of them, I was having a conversation with one of the ex-Muslims, and I was like, "Why you leave?" And they were like, "This and that reason." They gave all these intellectual reasons. But when I had a more in-depth conversation, it turned out their mum died, and that was it, to be honest. And I realized, they had an issue. Right? They had an issue because of that, basically. They had trauma because their mum died.
yeah, and I also remember Hamza once mentioning something similar.
Mm.
He's basically a professor in one of the universities, and afterwards, he approached him and he said, "Hamza, it's not actually any of the arguments of yours that I deny. It's just that my son died, so I can't accept that God can do something like that to myself."
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, a lot of it is like that.
Okay, I got another question. It says, "Why do you think that even though we have freedom of speech in America, American Muslims are less?" What did I say? Right, I got a thing somebody wrote it. Why was it less? I don't know what that is. Less something about LGBT than UK Muslims. Why are they less outspoken?
The culture of the US is much stronger. It's assimilationist culture, patriotic. In the UK, we don't, there's multiculturalism. It's not assimilation. It's not an assimilation model. Like a black person in America won't even know where they're from. Won't even know what country they're from. They'll say they're African Americans for the most part, unless they do know where they're from. But the majority of them, they'll just say we're African Americans. That's what we are. But in the UK, we know all too well where we come from. Ask a black guy in America, in England, they'll tell you I'm from Nigeria, I'm from the Igbo tribe, from this sub tribe, and they'll tell you everything. And that's why in the UK there's less of a push to assimilate, as I've said before. And so the culture isn't pushing. It's not pushy. It's more lax. It's like if you have those beliefs, that's your thing. That's where America is like, at the end of the day, you have to support America. It's like that, with us or against us.
Patriotism.
Yeah, it's strong patriotism. Strong patriotism. If you just listen to any sports, even if it's got nothing to, it's not even. It's like fighting, like two guys fighting, and then all of a sudden they're chanting USA, 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 USA. What do you mean USA? What do you mean USA? I mean, what's that got to do this? It's not America, but it's another country. In UFC, Kamaru Usman was going against Colby Covington, who's the Trump supporter. And out of nowhere, they started saying USA, USA, but both of those guys are meant to be American. So what are you talking about? I mean, it's just a strong. I remember as a kid, I actually remember WWE, or I was then called WWF.
It's
And,
fake.
and after, say again?
It's fake.
Yeah, it's fake.
I
But
had
I
these
remember
comments.
after 9/11, Vince McMahon, he came out and he started talking about like the country. He's talking about he's making a patriotic speech. What's that got to do with the wrestling? What's that got to? But it's so deeply entrenched into the US culture. US has a strong, pushy culture. I'm sure maybe I don't know. When you went to school, did they put up the flag? Did you have to salute the flag and do the national anthem, stuff like that?
Yeah, I think might be more prevalent here than there.
Yeah, in the UK that's unheard of. Like that's That's shocking. In fact, I would even go as far as to say, if people have an England flag and it's outside of like the sports seasons, it's not like England's not playing anyone, and they just have an England flag here in London, for example, the flag, the St. George flag, the red one,
Yeah,
uh, uh, they could be confused as being racist or part of the right wing.
that's
A
interesting.
lot of people might assume that because they're saying, "Why has you got an England flag?" It's not England are not playing football today,
Hmm.
you know. So, for instance, that's another point. Um, so I think it's because, and there's another thing as well, which is that in the UK we have the Muslims are putting it in a word, they're more poor, whereas in the US they come from families which are much more well off, and generally speaking, middle class people want to associate with middle class people, and working class people associate with working class people.
Yeah.
Um, so it's less likely to. I mean, that could be a factor as well. But I think culturally, I think there's a huge assimilation push in America.
Hmm. Okay, I got two more questions for you.
Yes.
Yeah. Firstly, I remember you making, I think it was Didi Hussein. You had a podcast with him one time,
Yes.
and he was saying, he's like, how come in America? I think he was commenting on some of the stances that some scholars have, or not scholars, but like some people in America have, or a lot of people in America have. He was basically he was astonished at the fact that in America, certain people tend to be a little more not supportive, but at the very least acquiescent to the idea than the UK, although America has, um, I guess, more open or less rigid freedom of speech guidelines. I remember sending you a text then also saying that in America, it's actually it's less rigid de jure, as in we're talking about laws and regulations, but de facto, if you look at the actual how it is on the ground, the society and such, it's actually very different. It's perhaps they're more difficult than the UK. Like for example, the Birmingham schools issues that you guys have. Um, I don't know if that's very. I've heard of that here. At least in the recent years, I know in the past there used to be things like that. Okay. Anyway, so we have a question from Rahma. It says, in regards to feminism, if the understanding is that differences in responsibilities and rights are due to biological differences, how do we respond to the idea that we can apply differences to our own lives, but everyone should have the choice to decide? The question is a little too long. I can probably read it twice. I guess the question is more theoretical because we do not live under Sharia laws anyway, but from a moral standpoint. I'll read the question again. It's a little too long, but in regard to feminism, if the understanding is differences of responsibilities and rights are due to biological differences, like isn't the difference between male and female due to their um, due to biological differences, how do you respond to the idea that we can apply differences to our own lives, but everyone should have the choice to decide? Did you get that?
Well, this is a liberal presupposition that we own our own bodies, and that we have we it's individualist presupposition, um, and the individualist presupposition is that we know what's best for us. The Muslim presupposition is yeah, the Muslim presupposition is actually different. It says that Allah, the Creator, knows what's best for us. In fact, there's a book. Let me see if I've got it here. One sec. Yeah, sorry, I can't find the book, but yeah. I'll
You
send you a picture of it. Yeah, so the liberalism is in flux now because some people are saying, some are communitarian, like are saying that we don't know what's best, the community knows what's best for us, not the individual. Michael Sandel has written many works on that, and he's on YouTube as well if you want to see his Harvard lectures. But the idea really that we know the best, what's best for ourselves, is unfounded from a Islamic perspective. We don't know what's best for us. We believe God knows what's best for us.
Yeah, I mean, I'd like to ask, what would be the objective then? If the best for ourselves, what would be the objective? Or, if, for example, if you want to, I think it's more of an utilitarian thing, or it's more of, if we know what the best for ourselves, it's like human welfare.
We
But
don't know. That's the point. We
it's just
don't
an
know.
assumption that is made, but there's no proof for it.
Yeah, it's the burden of proof is upon the one who's making the claim. If we know what's best for us, how do we know what's best? What is best for us? Is there such a thing as what's best for us, or the conceptions of a good life? You know. So yeah, I feel like the burden of proof is upon the one that's making the claim, and the presupposition here is that we know what's best for us, and that's unfounded.
Okay. Okay. Well, having spoken about the philosophical, or not philosophical, but having spoken about the LGBT community briefly, and all the pressures that are, I guess, implicitly or in a subliminal manner, upon the Muslim community, is it possible to be fully Muslim and fully American at the same time, or live in America in such environment?
I think you can live in America for sure, but to be fully American, I think there's lots of things in American culture that contradict Islam, quite frankly.
Well, maybe that's the dominant American culture. So the point here is, why can't my culture be American as well? My culture is as American as anybody else. Yeah.
I don't know. I
Or is
have
that like dominant American culture?
I have reservations with this. I mean, I'm British Muslim, right? But
Mm-hmm.
do I believe that British culture, with all that it entails, is compatible with Islam? I'd say no. I
Yeah,
think
definitely
British,
not.
yeah,
Definitely not.
and same thing with American culture, I guess. There's so many things within the culture that is antithetical to Islam. Um, so I think we have to be careful here. But yeah, for sure, labeling yourself as American or British is not. I don't see there's an issue with that. It's true.
Yeah, it's definitely not. Okay. Again, please, if anybody has any questions, please post something. See 1 second. Let me get some more questions from you. Sorry, it's a little messy. But to get questions from that end.
Of course.
Okay, sorry. I'm really sorry about that. So somebody asked,
Yeah.
you're coming back to visit Sacramento post-COVID.
Yeah, of course. I have to. The brothers would have to go and see the people, and there's no doubt about that.
I feel like, I still remember the times you were here.
Oh, it was very good, man. Enjoyed that.
Yeah, still have internal bloopers. Do you think there is a danger in trying to isolate ourselves from American mainstream lifestyle in order to adhere fully to our Islam? I think that somewhat is related to fully American and fully American, not fully American, but living in America while being a Muslim, I guess, to rephrase the question.
I think there's always a balance. You know, we're not trying to isolate ourselves from the people, but at the same time, we don't want to be mixing to the point where we're being changed. So that is a balance that every single one of us has to try and navigate.
Yeah, this reminds me of hadith. It says, I mean, maybe you can might not be the correct context for this, but let me know what you think. Basically, it says, "ما يخالط الناس ويصبر على أذاهم خير مما لا يخالط الناس ولا يصبر على أذاهم."
Yeah, and there's a huge difference of opinion on اختلاط versus uzla and stuff.
Yeah.
Mixing with the people and secluding yourself from them. And basically, the opinion I follow on this matter is mix with the people when you think the maslaha is there, or the common interest for the Muslim people, for yourself and your family, and for the da'wah is there, and leave them when you think the mafsada is there, and there's more mafsada than masalah. And then it goes back to masalah, meaning common interest, common good, and درء المفسدة مقدم على جلب المصلحة. What do we say? That to get rid of mafsada is more important than to try and gain maslaha or common good. So safety is the number one. Safety is the number one concern. Spiritual safety, and if you can guarantee, or at least you have a ghalab to dhan, or you believe through likelihood that you will be protected from that, from the evil effects of mainstream people in the mainstream who follow the dominant ethic. And I think it's a maslaha mafsada issue, basically.
Okay, so this is an interesting question. So basically, it's saying on the grid from right to left, conservative to liberal, Labour to the Tories. Morally, who's better to support? Where do we fall on the grid?
We don't fall anywhere on the grid. We genuinely are completely we transcend the spectrum, the political spectrum. We don't agree with the grid in the first place. We have to be our own entity, and we have to rely on ourselves. We can't let these the left wing dictate our future and trajectory in the US. We can't allow that to happen, and we have to be, as the blacks were in the 1960s, our own unit, or as the Jews are now. We should be the influencers. We shouldn't be outsourcing our influence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think a lot of it does also go back to social pressures, and as in, I mean, a lot of the time when you're talking, I feel like you're mentioning being slightly on the offensive. Currently, we're more of on the defensive. Is it harm in being on just the defensive, or like when I'm approached, then I speak, but otherwise I'm to myself, or expected to be outspoken on certain things?
You have to be outspoken in certain things, otherwise it will just reinforce weakness of character. Man ra'a minkum munkaran falyughayyirhu biyadihi, as the Prophet ﷺ. If whoever sees a munkar or an evil open act, then let him change it with his hand. If he can't, فإن لم يستطع فبلسانه. Then with his tongue. If he can't, then at least let him hate it in his heart. So we can't jump to hating things in our heart. We have to go through the process of seeing if we can make a change first.
Okay, what does it say? Can't read this. I'm sorry. Sorry, I can't read this. Sorry, I'm getting 100 questions, but I can't read them. Sorry. Okay, the question says, in what ways were you able to find that balance in the UK? Was there a certain mindset you had to cultivate or certain actions you had to take? Or is it just,
I mean, don't forget there are some differences. For example, we've got a much smaller population and relatively a much bigger Muslim populace. So we've got about 2 to 3 million. So it constitutes about maybe 5 to 6% of the population. You guys only have 1% of the population, or Muslim, which is maybe a smaller number in numbers than there are in Britain, and a much smaller ratio. So there's that. But there's also the fact that most of our people are traditionalists. A lot of your people are liberals. So uh, it's just the fact that they don't. It's money at the end of the day. They don't want to lose money. They don't want to get out of a job. They don't want to break connections that they have with the middle class, because people in the US, Muslims in the US, are pound for pound much higher off, better off in terms of GDP per capita than people in the UK. And all of these influences make risk-taking behavior, much more profitable from a game theory perspective, if you like, for Muslims in the UK. And so their opinions are more loudly stated, and ghettos and so on are easily created. And if you go to London, there are pockets of areas of Muslim areas. If you go to Birmingham, same thing. So um, basically, mobilizing the people is easier, because you have in 100 meters squared area, you have like 3 or 4 masajid, and they can be mobilized. In America's mobilization is much more difficult. People are much more risk averse in terms of speaking their mind and what they believe in and so on, because they're afraid to lose their jobs and positions, because they have high positions and jobs, and they just want to fit in with the rest of the people.
yeah,
All of these factors and more make it more difficult for them to really prosper from that perspective and be strong-minded. But at the end of the day, you know, as we need to grow a backbone in America, in the UK, and everywhere, and we need to realize what the priorities of life are. If we do that, then we won't have this kind of risk-averse attitude, which is almost pathetic, to be honest. That some imams are going over, not they are fully supporting. I'm not talking about yaqeen here, by the way. I'm talking about people, that other imams in the US, that are totally on board, you see, with the LGBTQ thing. You see what I mean? So that's the problem. And
yeah.
yeah,
Okay. So I got another question saying, can you tell us about your day-to-day schedule? You seem very, what was that? I always need to improve your handwriting, man. Handwriting classes. Knowledgeable, and I'd like to know how you spend your time.
spend of the 168 hours in the week, I spend 50 hours sleeping. I spend approximately 40 hours working.
I objected. I don't think you sleep that much, to be honest with you.
Pardon?
I don't think you sleep that much, to be honest with you.
50 hours. 7 hours per day times 7 to 49 hours.
Okay, fair enough.
I believe that's about right. And then I spend about 40 hours working, and then also I've got a few projects that I'm doing outside of that, so maybe 20 hours doing that. So altogether now we've got 60 plus 50 is 120. Then let's say I read Quran every day. I try and read an hour, so put 7 there, and then and add the prayers and all that stuff. Maybe another 7. Training, train at least 2 or 6, 8, 10. I would say about 8 to 10 hours a week. Uh, you see, so what's that? 120, 130. about 150. So the rest of the time, the 20 hours that are remaining is spending time with the family, the kids, teaching them.
Zishan.
I teach my kid. I go, yeah, yeah, Zisha. I go to his house and stuff, and film some stuff. Yeah, film some stuff. The kids as well. I try and I was before I was doing a good job, but I try and spend 20 minutes a day with them for 5 days a week, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. So about almost 2 hours. If you think about it. I've got 3 kids, so that's I only teach 2 of them because the third one is only 2 years old. So I teach them Arabic. I teach them a bit of stories of the Prophet, stuff like that. If you add it all up, it's about an hour and a half, 2 hours a week. And then, you know, yeah, in terms of all the other things like having a shower and going to the toilet and stuff, I
ما
believe,
شاء الله حسبها حسبها يا ما شاء الله حسبها حسبها.
yeah, I think that'll take about 3, 4 hours. And eating, actually, you'd be surprised. Probably, it might take 3, 4 hours as well. So, especially when I consume a lot of food in the day, probably about 3 to 4,000 calories. So
ما شاء الله.
that's about how I live my life.
Allah barik. Again, maybe it's somewhat related to the topic,
Oh yeah,
but
and also like obviously, sorry to say, I
yeah,
have
go on.
some dude that I do on a Saturday. I have one sheikh. Spend 4 hours with it, about 4 hours with him, and another sheikh I spend about 3 hours with him. So the studying that I do is probably about 7 hours, or maybe a little bit more, maybe 8 hours a week. And I've got some lectures I have to do as well. Like, uh,
I don't know.
so if I watch all my lectures, that's maybe 3, 4 hours. So we're talking about a good 15 hours of studies in the week
MashaAllah.
outside the Quran, yeah, something like that.
Okay. This final question, the question is as follows: why is it important to be woke in your society that you're in, rather than not only isolating yourself physically, but also isolating yourself um, ideologically or intellectually by being oblivious to everybody around you, just literally living in your own bubble? Why is it important for me to know what's going on in the realms of politics wherever I'm living, or in the realms of like whatever you're studying? Just being woke or getting to know everything around you and spending the day on Netflix.
Because that allows you to contextualize, and it allows you to um, be able to make the right kind of change. I mean, yeah, if you wanna change jahili, you have to know it. If you want to change the ignorance of the society that you live in, then you have to know the ignorance in the society that you live in. It's like a doctor not knowing, he's not doing a diagnostic. He won't be able to solve any issues.
Mm-hmm. Somebody asked a question. It's a little silly, to be honest. I think it might be one of the brothers here. It says, "Is this the longest amount of time you have stayed up?" Anyway, moving swiftly on. Moving swiftly on. So yeah, I guess that's about all the questions I have. People, if you have any questions, please post in the chat. Otherwise, we can, I guess, round it off here and get ready for the next segment. Like every time, I know you're retired. You have a lot going on. You had a very long day, but profusely grateful for your time.
I'm ready. I'm ready for the questions.
I'm ready for them too, but I want to get them. Inshallah. I didn't get any questions. I mean, these are all the questions I got. I got other questions, but they're very long-winded. So
Yeah.
do that now. I'm going into the fiqh of voting and what have you. So
No,
yeah, we have about 5 minutes left. Somebody says wait. Okay, somebody's typing something up. So we'll wait for now. Yeah, just give me a minute. 1 second. So somebody's asking, how important are the morning and evening adhkar, or the durood or whatever?
I like those. They're very good. They're excellent. They're brilliant. Just to do that, it's just you want to anchor your day with certain staple parts that you want to make your life predictable too, because that prevents anxiety, prevents depression, sadness. It sort of solidifies your schedule, and it acts as